Hello and welcome to the Penno channel. I'm joined here for a special podcast. Firstly, I'm with my bro as usual. Bro, how you doing? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, bro. Looking forward to this podcast, man. How you been?
Yeah, all good, brother. And this one's been a long time coming. We've had it in the works for a while, but now as the season's finished, everything's settling down. We thought we'd get him on. So if you use Twitter or X as it's now called, there's a big page on there called the Villa Academy. Now, I feel like Villa official page doesn't really represent truly how what's going on in the academy. And there's one page on Twitter that does that, and it's the person who's joined us, Charlie from the Villa Academy Twitter page. Thanks for joining us, mate. This is a pleasure, honestly.
Yeah, it's a pleasure for me. Like, I don't really do this as often as I probably should to speak about the account and sort of things that are happening during the or in the academy. So it's good to be somewhere where I can talk more freely about things.
This is the platform to get everything you get across, because I know there's a number of people, subscribers to this channel as well, who follow your page, and they'd probably, like myself, get all their information from your page. Because it goes into such detail and you cover the majority of games ranging from under 18s to the 21s in all the Premier League too, and other competitions as well and other age groups. So yeah, really appreciate you being on here. Just a quick one from me first. How did you get into this? How did you start?
Really, just interest throughout my life. Like I've always kind of found an interest from when I had my first season tickets and getting a program at Villa Park and looking at the reserves results and the under 18s results, and I think it's just an interest that's kind of stuck with me throughout my life. And then on sort of following on from that is then seeing, I don't know whether it's Villa's top goal scorer in 2007 and then popping up in 2011-12 somewhere in the Football League and thinking like, oh, that's that player that I saw in the programme. Or I saw in an article on the club website in a match report like that 10-1 reserves win over Arsenal and stuff like that. Seeing those players and how and sort of following their journeys. And that kind of transcended itself into realising that the club don't really cover the academy as well as they could. The information that's out there, I think the club could do a way better job at covering the academy. There's so many clubs that have dedicated academy accounts, and we're not even talking like big clubs. Like Norwich's academy account is one of the best, and I think that sort of grew into realising that I can probably do a better job, and that's only with limited access, and so that's kind of how I got to the point that I'm at. But yeah, mainly just an interest in following the players and seeing the results in the minimal way that we get from the club.
Yeah, for me, I can see that the interest you do have, and it comes across in what you provide for people who do follow you, because it's detailed, it's in depth, and there's a lot of information and a lot of stuff, as you say, the club don't provide, and I agree with that statement. So yeah, as you're saying, over the years, I remember like from when I started reading a program, you'd see now Nathan D'Alfonso or Andy Vyman back in the day. You'd see him scoring goals every week and coming through the academy, and you'd be eager to see him be part of the first team. And it's a big factor of the club. It's a massive factor of the club. So yeah, your updates really do help to provide what's going on. And we'll get into more detail here. But we'll start off.
Just to say though, some of the feedback I always see on Charlie's account is, thank goodness for you, because without you, we wouldn't know these things. But yeah, that just shows how big of a role Charlie plays in providing the content that people obviously want and people demand.
Facts, that's for sure. Don't disagree with that at all. So yeah, firstly then, we'll go for a big one first. Who's the best talent, do you think, in your opinion, coming through the academy currently?
There's so many ways to approach this question. So I think the one sort of on the tip of everyone's tongue at the moment is Amari Kellyman. Like it's undeniable the talent you have to kind of break through into an Emery squad and to make that breakthrough into minutes as well. So I think it's impossible to ignore that Kellyman is probably the one that sort of stands the best chance of of making a consistent breakthrough. And when you see him drop back into the 21s now, you see the benefit of all the time that he will have spent training with the first team and having that exposure. Because when he plays, he makes so much more of a consistent impact that it's hard to say anyone else. If we're talking about players that possibly haven't like made the breakthrough into a first team squad, or maybe are so well known within more like casual circles, I guess. I'm a big fan of Jamal Gimo Aloba. He's kind of in the same profile as Kellyman, in that he's physically strong, but he possesses really good ball carrying qualities and shown a real maturity in his final third play, and he's one that I've really enjoyed watching last season, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that develops this season, whether the club think he's ready for a loan, whether there's interest in a loan somewhere else, or whether that's sort of nailing down that place with the under 21s and showing exactly why he should be going on loan possibly in the future seasons. But yeah, Gimo Aloba, I think is one that I'd consider to be high up the list of players that I'd be looking to hopefully make a breakthrough soon.
Yeah, I've seen Gimo Aloba's name pop up quite, especially over this season. His name's popped up quite a lot.
He looks a good player. He looks a good player, definitely.
Yeah, and what I've seen of him, he does look a quality player. I'm going to go into a few of the comments quickly. Michael's joined us tonight. Evening all. Michael says, thanks for joining, Michael. Deontay's in here as well. Thanks for joining, Deontay. Michael says, this is great. Yeah, agreed. It's a big part of Aston Villa, and it's nice to have someone on here that knows his stuff regarding the academy and can provide us the information regarding it. Michael says there is room for improvement for sure. I remember Villa used to get around 10,000 watching the young players. Yeah.
Wow.
Getting to that level again and getting that amount of people to go down and watch them for sure. Because as we've seen recently, there's been a greater push in the academy through Villa, especially when we had such a good crop coming from the Youth Cup win. A number of players, some still in the squad now, and obviously one or two have moved on. That was the crop in the generation, and it felt like they were pushed a bit further. But yeah, we'll get onto that. GA's also joined us, and he said, "Good evening, boys. Hope you're all okay." Thanks for joining, GA.
Evening, bro.
As I was just saying, around the FA Youth Cup time, obviously we won it, and there was a number of players in there who, for Villa fans now, who are much recognised names. Obviously, Carney has moved on now, but just looking from the weekend, you still have a Timu Boonen, you still have a Kane Kessler-Hayden, who are still part of the squad. Other players who will be recognisable just from name, Louis Barry was part of that team as well. And then even at the weekend, you see a number of youth players. You've seen Alfie Monroe make his debut recently. It's really interesting. And Marshall as well, goalkeeper, Philip Marshall, coming through the academy. And just your thoughts on that and the current pathway from getting through to the academy to the first team.
It's an interesting one because my opinion is, I think sometimes academies suffer for the first team success. And so looking at where Villa are going, obviously heading into a debut season in the Champions League, naturally, I think opportunities to play first team football diminish somewhat because you're playing more serious football more regularly, and there's higher stakes. And so I think there's less opportunity for those sort of throwaway minutes in the final stages of games where results matter so much. Obviously, the benefit of qualifying for the Champions League is that the academy will also be in the UEFA Youth League next season, and that's a huge one because I think it gives more platform for players to sort of demonstrate their ability and the rigors of playing against different styles of opposition, different levels of football, different refereeing and coping with that transition. So I think that will be a huge one in terms of how we see players develop and the pathway into a team that is playing in the Champions League. We've seen at places like Liverpool where Ben Doak and players along those lines have impressed in the UEFA Youth League and then gone on to feature in European competitions. So I think it will be a big one for the likes of it could be possibly a Kellyman or a Roy Wilson or somebody of similar ilk who impresses and then makes that jump up. In terms of more concretely about pathway, I don't necessarily think Emery has the best record for bringing through youth players. I think sometimes it can be interpreted as a sort of stumbling across talent. And I think opportunity is a big one when it comes to academy players making breakthroughs. The whole thing around sort of timing and being available at the right time. Sort of how Rashford came onto the scene, how Saka came onto the scene is through really being forced into making that decision. And I think, like I said previously, I think potentially our success might come at a cost of whether these players actually make it at Villa, because at the end of the day, you've got a bit more of a stressful situation in which to give someone a first opportunity, and it's tough to make that decision. Not everyone is capable. Equally, I would say sometimes you don't know until you drop them in. Rashford is the prime example of someone who I don't think probably would have got the opportunity had everyone been fit. He gets dropped in, he makes an impact and stays around. And so I'm a big fan of, or a big advocate of the you never know until you get dropped in the deep end with the academy. Some players float and some players don't. And pathways always a tough topic.
Yeah, I think the big one over recent times for us is Jacob Ramsey, who's made that pathway fulfilled. Becoming a first team player and then a regular, and then a player we relied on as of last season, who was imperative. And you saw the process of him going from the academy, making it all the way up to being an integral player, representing England at the under-21s, and was on the cusp of becoming an England international because of how well he was playing. So it does show if you've got the talents there, you can make it for sure. But as you were saying, it's a bit different now. We're in a bit of a different position for sure, and it will be interesting to see if because we were down to the bare bones this season, potentially a lot of the youth players were on the bench because of that reason, rather than the level which Henry thinks they're at Villa.
Charlie, I wanted to ask you, should fans expect players from the academy to make it to the first team for the most part? Because a lot of the times when I see someone doing well in the academy, I always see that push from fans to say, get them in the first team, get them on the bench. Should most academy players make it to the first team, or is it a case of the academy is there to build a player to make them have a good future in football, not necessarily always at Aston Villa? What's your thoughts on that?
So I think definitely the main purpose of an academy and the purpose of academy coaches is not necessarily directly to create footballers for Aston Villa. I think that would be what they would say is their primary purpose, but their secondary purpose, and I think what earns these people their money, is creating professional players who go on to have stellar careers, if not high-level careers. I think people read into a bit too much whether a player makes it or not at Villa as much, and I think that comes from the natural perception of an academy success being creating a player at the club that they've come through at. But no, I think the wider purpose of academy football in general is about sort of fulfilling and creating players who then go on to sort of be the linchpins of Football League teams, and we can look back for numerous examples of Villa doing that throughout the years, whether that's Barry Bannon or a Nathan D'Alfonso or a Vyman. And I think that gives coaches more pleasure perhaps than creating one player who makes it a Villa. It is if you can look back and say I've played a part in 10 players going on to become long-term professionals, then I think you sort of served your purpose within football a bit more than creating maybe or playing a part in Agbonlahor's progress, who goes on to make however many appearances at Villa.
Yeah,
for sure. This ties into go on, bro.
Yeah, just to say, I think sometimes I do understand the fans' appetite to have another player come through the academy, and because we've had the rare example where we've had a guy come through in Jack Grealish who's gone on to be sold for 3 figures, and he was our best player at the time. So I guess Villa fans still kind of think, while it worked for Jack, it kind of worked for Ramsey as well. Is there another one coming through? And there's almost like the added pressure on whenever a player does well in the academy. It's almost like, okay, come, let him come to the first team and see how he does. But yeah, I guess there's got to be the patience side of it as well, where it's just like not every player is gonna make it through, as Charlie said, and it's not always the main thing for an academy coach, and it's not really their job in that sense.
Yeah, this leads into a question Michael's had, and some of my thoughts as well. So obviously there was a big push on the academy, and our attempt to sign players of a younger age from other clubs to get them on the books within the academy. And this ties in with what Michael said and how that happened under kind of like the early days of the Perslow regime, and developing the facility as well within that time. Do you think Villa will follow the Man City route with academy players being used or being part of sellable assets?
I think it's hard not to be accepting of that mantra because it's something that I think clubs look at, and you can see it now in the kind of financial predicament that we're left in with the PSR regulations, of this allure of pure profit. And if you can create a high level talent who then you're able to sell for, whether it be somewhere between 1 to 10 million to another club, then it's hard not to see that as attractive. But equally, I think it's hard, I think it's important to recognise that with Man City, they create players who get opportunities, and Foden is an academy player. Palmer is an academy player who, in a different set of circumstances, might still be at City now, and we're seeing the impact that he's had at Chelsea. And so I think the nuance comes from recognising when to sell, if you're going to sell, and recognising possibly the point of highest value, or when it makes sense to let a player go on and sort of spread their wings.
Yeah, I agree with that notion as well. I mean, City still have, Rico Lewis is another one who's come through, who's now part of the first team squad. They do Oscar Bob, another one now as well. So yeah, City do promote those players coming through, and they get an opportunity as well, even though they have some assets that they do sell on at certain points. There's still, they do get the best crop, but they're still pushing through talent into that first team squad for sure. So yeah,
they've almost built a brand as well, where it's just like you're kind of getting like a certain guarantee if they're a City Academy player. Like we see a lot of Championship clubs now buying players that were from Man City's academy. You've seen it with Villa and Morgan Rogers, who was at City's academy as well. There's almost like a level of technical ability and like understanding and teaching that they've been through since Pep's gone there, where it's like they maybe get a bit more for their assets as well, based on that brand that they've built.
Yeah, of course, because even if you think about it, Southampton last year, they had a Dozy. They, Roman Lavia was signed from Manchester City.
And then he's gone to Chelsea as well.
exactly. This season, Sheffield United signed James McAtee, Wolves signed Tommy Doyle, so they're just dispersed around the whole of the league, and that just shows the talent that they do bring in. And I feel like Villa, in some aspects, are trying to follow that model for sure and try and have the best academy within the country, as you know, as best as they can, for sure.
I think something that City have really sort of developed a super strength with is sort of having a clear philosophy throughout the academy, and you don't make it at City unless you're able to play the Guardiola way. And so the clear focus right from the bottom to the top is ability to play with a high level of technical ability. And while I think a lot of academies would say the same thing about technical ability being the sort of leading aspect of the early development of a player, I think City take that to another level, and it's a different level of almost maturity that comes from the micro coaching that I think they get at City compared to different places along the way. And like we said, there's a different level of trust that you can put in a player that comes through the City Academy, because you know that they have been sort of water tested for the types of situations which you come across as a professional team.
Yeah, facts. Having said that, since Unai Emery's come in to Villa, so that over the past 18 months, have you seen a noticeable change in style of play to relate to what the first team players in a higher line, mid-block at times, a more possession-based style of football that they've tried to transcend through, through a younger age group up into the first team?
Absolutely, and I think that partly becomes because of the power that Emery holds within our infrastructure at the moment, and so initially it was bringing in Inigo Idiaquez, who was Emery's man, and since then it's Josep Gombau, and there has been a real shift in the style of football that they play. You really see that commitment to fullbacks, providing width and the sort of lopsidedness within the fullbacks, knowing when one needs to sit and one needs to go, and increasingly the dynamism within midfield is clear to see. Todd Alcock and Aidan Borland have had a standout second half of the season, and it's kind of mirroring in ways what we see with the first team in the quality we see from Douglas Luiz and whichever of his partners it is at times, and the dynamism to get through midfield and sort of be that link. I think in general, it's always a balance, isn't it? The idea will be to develop a style of football and mimic what the first team are doing, and then you temper that with wanting to get results as well. And I think since Josep Gombau came in, there has been a bit more of a consistent setup within the team, and that comes from obviously outgoing loans and injuries and things like that. But also, I've seen a clear move towards wanting to get results. And two things with that. I think one comes from having players of a certain age. So in the 21s team at the moment, there are players who are 18, 19 who are getting towards, let's call it like a decision stage of their career, where they need to decide whether they're going to go on and be a professional footballer elsewhere, or whether it's going to be continuing to make that progress at Villa. And I think with that, you can sort of lose the developmental aspect of trying to teach a certain way of playing football, because you kind of trust that they have the maturity to play it. And so you then go on to be able to achieve or set out a different way when you play playoff football, as we were towards the end of the season, or playing knockout stages of a cup competition towards the end of the season, and you see a more professional approach in that you're playing to win as opposed to you're playing to develop which I think if we look more at the under-18s, you're playing to develop rather than playing to win.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea, instilling that mentality, because I feel like the stage we're currently at now, with 4 competitions as well, playing Champions League football next season, we see clubs of, that stature of, say, a Big Six will use academy players within, let's say, a League Cup. Now, I know we're not in a position to say, because we haven't won a trophy in such a long time, but you can still see that a number of, if we're playing elements of our style within the younger age groups, and the Premier League 2 team, the under 18s, I feel like there's more of a chance that we'll see players being used in those competitions in the early rounds, for sure. So that makes sense why they would do that for sure, especially with the level of competition we're going to be facing next season.
And it only helps because players will be stress tested for these types of situations. The Premier League 2 playoff last 16 game that we had against Spurs was a prime example of the kind of situation that we might face in a European competition or in a cup competition, because we were playing against a team really who is expected to beat us. And by all accounts, they went there and they were the better team and were unfortunate to lose in extra time in really unfortunate circumstances. So those kinds of experiences are beneficial in helping trying to nurture players who are ready to make the step, whether that be in European competition or in a domestic cup.
Yeah. Just before we continue.
I just wanted to, if you want to read comments first, and I'll just ask the next.
No, I was just going to say, just a shout out. We've got Charlie in it. If you could like the stream, and if you're new around here, subscribe. This is a very interesting talk with Charlie. He's giving us a lot of details and information. So we'd appreciate that. And also drop your comments as well, whether it's in the chat or after the video, if you've got any comments that you'd like to, have addressed as well. Yeah, before I go on, just a few things to point out. Gary H has joined us. Thanks for joining, Gary. He said, do you think there should be a rule like there used to be, so that at least one academy player comes on in each game?
I think it would be impossible to implement because of the varying qualities of Premier League academies. There are Premier League academies. Bournemouth is a good example, because Bournemouth don't have a Category 1 academy, so it almost puts them at a disadvantage. To bring in a rule like that, I think the Premier League went some way towards that with the homegrown player rule. I think one of the sort of hidden motivations for that is to try and motivate clubs to bring through their own talent. But no, I don't think it's possible to bring in something like that, unfortunately, as much as I think someone like myself would like to see it and would like to see players given opportunities. I just don't think it would be, all clubs would agree to it, to be honest, because it puts them, as I say, some clubs in a worse position than others.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I don't know is it Brentford? Do Brentford not have an academy anymore as well?
Yeah, Brentford have a B team, and so they don't really have a season structure. They play friendlies throughout the season, really, that are arranged by the club, and they play in the Premier League Cup as well. But no, it's not a traditional academy setup.
Okay. Yeah, that is interesting. Obviously, it's the same again. Something I'd like to see, but it's a level playing field. Then some clubs are going to be able to bring in prospects, of a higher level. And yeah, the way how the Premier League is so competitive now, and each detail is so important. Yeah, I don't think that will be put into fruition. There's one player I want to talk about, and that's Caden Young. Now, I remember it was a cold night against Villarreal in a friendly, and at the start of that season, in the pre-season as well, and he was in a number of squads. Caden Young was very prominent within the Villa. He got a few appearances. He was prominent in the squad though, and since that point, he's kind of not been around as much or not had the influence. How's Caden been getting on?
He's had a bit of a stop-start season due to injury. And I think it's the kind of thing you see quite a lot in academy, because you have to temper that breakthrough with the physical rigors of what they're going through. And I think more and more clubs are starting to become aware of workload on certain players. Caden, I think towards the end of the season, was coming into his own again, and we're starting to see the best version of him. And it's undeniable when you see players getting international recognition. He's currently playing for the England under-18, scored last night. It's hard to argue with the fact that he clearly is a top prospect and someone, like you said, who we saw in the early stages of Emery's reign get an opportunity in that friendly with Villarreal, and I think he impressed people that night too.
He did indeed, yeah.
And I think he's got something to add. He's a direct winger. He's got an array of finishes, and he's an exciting player. If the physical side can match up to where we think he can be, then absolutely, I think he's someone who could make that step. He featured in a couple of squads towards the end of the season, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
he was on the bench for Palace, wasn't
he? Yeah. So yeah. I think that's a positive. That can only be a positive thing going into the start of next season, knowing that he's sort of in the thoughts.
Yeah. I just want to change it a bit. We mentioned Idiakis, who left Villa to go and manage Rail Union. I think that's correct. So
he did.
More in, yeah, before he did. So yeah, in terms of the use of clubs within V Sports and within that organisation, obviously we have a number of clubs now plotted around the world.
This is good timing, because there's recent reports just yesterday that we're investing in Vasco da Gama as well. So
yeah,
that one's the most exciting one. Like, I don't know, people have a lot of different opinions on the multi-club model, and I don't actually think, like, obviously is everything. It's kind of like a race to the bottom in terms of like the sport growing and stuff, and other clubs buying clubs. But in terms of a Villa owner's point of view, investing in Brazil, which is the most talented crop of players on planet Earth, in my opinion, it does feel like a big step. But anyway, I'll let you go on with the question. But I just thought that timing was quite good as well.
Yeah, it's bang on. Obviously, two players who were under contract came through the Vasco Academy, in Philip Coutinho and Douglas Luiz. So a lot of Vasco fans will know who Villa are because of that and the appeal, and Philip Coutinho, potentially one of the best players that's come out of that academy. So yeah, looking into that, obviously we had two players in Josh Feeney and Tom O'Reilly who went out on loan to Rail Union. Yeah, if you could, how did they get on whilst they were there, and just let us know your thoughts regarding feeder clubs and how Villa are trying to operate now.
So my opinion on these Rail Union loans is that they have been pretty awful for all parties that were concerned, and that's the same for Inigo Idiakes, who has essentially been used as a chess piece by whether it's NSWE or by his relationship with Emery and the structure they have between Rail Union and Villa. Feeney, from what I hear, has had a couple of more interesting performances. I believe they've still got a game to go in their season, so they're still there. Yeah, their final game of the season is this weekend. But really, it went pretty horrifically. Tommy O'Reilly played the first game and broke his hand, and I don't believe has made an appearance. He's made one sub appearance since. Feeney has had more minutes, but in terms of results for Rail Union, it's been pretty horrific. They're just probably going to stay up on the final day. They're 2 points clear of the relegation zone, with a couple of teams between them and the first place in the relegation zone. So I think it's not really been as prosperous as we thought. I think we come with this, whether it's a disillusion or the right perception to have that these players should be going there and should be better than what's there. It's not really played out that way, because they've, as with all clubs in this sort of feeder model, they're a football club at the end of the day. They've got a livelihood to sustain, and so my opinion with these types of loans has always been that managers fall into the rhythm of trusting their more experienced players and trusting players who have been there longer, perhaps, or have shown that they can provide results. And naturally, that's not a good surrounding for a loan player to be in, because you need to have someone who trusts the player at their disposal. And I think Tommy O'Reilly is one I would have looked at and said, this is a guy who should go and rip up that league. Tommy O'Reilly was, again, someone who featured in Premier League squads and was featured in pre-season too.
Made his senior
he got an assist. Yeah. He made his debut at Zrinjski.
Yeah.
And again, someone who is making a first team debut at Villa, you would look and say, if he goes to the Spanish third division, he should be tearing it up. And it's that whole thing about timing and situational stuff that can impact your development. And he got an injury in his first game, and it's not worked out the way it should have. The Real Union link, I think, is a bit of nepotism in any case. From what I understand, Feeney and O'Reilly didn't really have much choice in whether they went on loan or not. They were pretty much told you're going to Real Union, and I don't think that's whether it's a good message to send to the academy or even just a good breeding ground for someone to go and develop somewhere. Because if you're told to do something and you don't want to do it, naturally you're going to look more negatively on the surroundings.
Yeah, I just remember seeing their fans as well. Like, they were playing like good football before that happened, and Idiakes went there, and then I think they just lost a lot of games, and then he lost his job. They sacked him. And
reminds me of Gerrard.
Yeah, because it's Emery's brother, isn't it? That runs the club. It's Emery's actual brother. So he lost his job, and then you think about the connotations of that. Whereas the Villa coach has left his job, what's that going to do for the Villa players? They'll probably get treated with less respect as well, or less game time. So it's just, I kind of side-eyed it when I saw it. As I thought, well, that's a bit. Like, these are the top talents. Like, Feeney represents England at his level, and O'Reilly's a really good player. And I thought, Spanish third, is it, like, what's the message behind the move? I thought they could have got like championship moves, potentially League One. So yeah, it's interesting, man. Especially now, Charlie. Is it right that the Vitoria suspension, we can now loan players to them? Is that over now? Was it a year ban or?
I'm not too well versed on the Vitoria situation, to be honest, but if that does become an option, then absolutely, I think that's something that would be more beneficial to our players to play at a higher level. I like I said, I think the Real Union thing was a bit of nepotism, sending perceived best talents to the third division of Spanish football, where they're playing against La Liga B teams, really. Like, if you want to play against high level academy, stay at Villa and play against the PL2 teams each week.
Just a quick question, Charlie. Out of the players currently in the academy or the fringe of our first team, who could you see as the type of profile of player that would make that loan move to Vitoria, or who Villa might send there to get that kind of level of football?
So I think I think the obvious one people would look towards is Lamar Bogard, purely just based on his age and the experience that he's got in the EFL. He's had two EFL loans, performed reasonably well from what I've seen on social media from Bristol Rovers fans. Joey Barton loved him. Obviously, we know all about Joey Barton, so I don't think that's much to brag about. But yeah, I think he'd be a clear candidate, and I think it's something that can be used a bit more specifically for players who are reaching the end of their development with Villa, where we would normally have that what I called earlier the decision stage of their career. If you can use a year for a Lamar Bogard, who he's clearly someone with a high level of potential, to almost use it as a break year in his Villa contract, go and show what you can do on a relatively big stage that's of a higher quality than League One. and prove to Villa why you should be making the breakthrough to the first team. It's a really good opportunity for a player like that. Bogard, I think, again, similar sorts of players. Kane, Kessler, Hayden is one that you could look at. If a keeper, Sinisalo, I think would be a good option, because again, he's played League One football, which is a good level, season. But Vittoria is a step up from that, and so if he could be a number one in Liga NOS for a season, then again, it just adds another string to his bow, and a different test, really, playing football in a different country where perhaps there's a bit more of a demand to play a certain way.
Yeah, Charlie knows I'm a big fan of Sinisalo, man.
Didn't he get goalkeeper of the season?
He won He won 7 trophies on the award night. I can remember. I'll quickly find that'll tell me.
He was mad because he took Exeter further in the League Cup than us this season. They went on a little bit of a
That's so sick.
He won 7 awards on their awards night, and I think a lot of that was like sponsors player of the season, though, so not really proper awards. But I think there was a players player of the season, there was a fans player of the season, stuff like that, and obviously it goes to show the impact that he's had. That they were all
started for Finland as well, didn't he? No?
Yeah, he made his debut for Finland against San Marino, and they conceded. They conceded to San Marino.
He's a lucky goal deflection.
That's one thing I love to see. If an academy player, obviously I'd love them to thrive at Villa and come through at Villa, but if that does not happen, alone or moving on somewhere else, I love to see them thrive and become a professional footballer and make a career out of it. Because at the end of the day, they've put so much time and effort into getting into that position, and that the final stretch, it's good to see that for sure. That they develop and become professional footballers, whether it's at Villa or not at Villa at all. So yeah, tying in with what you were saying regarding Real Union and the level, looking at it now, it is strange considering the partnerships we have with ZFC, which is Egyptian Premier League side, Vissel Kobe, they're a J1, so top Japanese league. So Vasco would be top Brazilian league, also Vitória, Portuguese Premier League. They're in the top divisions within their leagues, whereas our Union isn't in a La Liga. So yeah, that is, looking on it now, that's an interesting point, and yeah, kind of. I don't know if it's a strange decision, but I wonder if there's potential to go to one of a Vitória, as you said.
But speaking, just going back to Bogard, like he felt like a massive coup at the time. Like I remember he came from where Feyenoord and Arsenal were linked as well. Like the media said at the time, and he was highly rated when he came in. So Bogard, I kind of did think that he'd be the one that would make it for our first team, or would be the one you'd think would have the best chance. But it hasn't quite happened.
He's been unlucky with injuries. From what I gather, he definitely had a stress fracture at one time.
Oh wow!
Which plays into that conversation about workload and things like that. But even now, still just like a really outstanding profile. The kind of profile that makes you think he's going to have a career in professional football one way or another. He's got really strong ball playing ability to the point where he can play as a centre back in a play out system, or he can play as the DM and he's trusted to receive and get the ball away in those situations. When I've really been impressed with Lamar Bogard in the EFL Trophy. That's when you see these more experienced academy players shine, and I think he did really well and sort of leads that team really well. Like I said, we're kind of at that decision stage with him, because playing another year of academy football is of no benefit to him right now. I've had people messaging me asking about links to RZ. And I don't know anything about that, but yeah, it's the kind of thing where you wouldn't be surprised to see him move back to his home country and fall into a bit more familiar surroundings where the Eredivisie can be seen as a bit more of a developmental league where you can trust to play players who fit a certain profile and actually give them a consistent run. So if that were to transpire, then it's definitely not a bad move for him, and it would be beneficial long term. But yeah, I would love to see him make it at Villa. I think there is still this question about what his best role is.
Yeah,
I like him as a DM, but he plays a lot of football at centre back. He's played pretty much all of his games for Villa in the second half of the season at centre back.
Yeah. Going on. Gary's got a question here, and I think it was a name that we all talked about for you. Louis Barry said, "Is Charlie disappointed with the Louis Barry situation?" And what's happened? Obviously, this season he was absolutely flying at Stockport until he got such a severe injury, which was such a shame because it looked like he'd finally found a home where he was going to excel and come back and maybe get a move to a higher league position, or do something at Villa. Who knows? But he was really thriving, and he got such a severe injury, and again, it just seems like his luck was out regarding that. But yeah, at the time, we've obviously Louis Barry coming in from Barcelona and the talk, we saw him score against Liverpool in the FA Cup, FA Youth Cup. He was pivotal within that team as well. We disappointed with how Louis Barry's career's panned out.
No, I just simply because of that whole creating players who serve a purpose wherever that may be, professional career. Granted, he came in with a big expectation. I think that comes from having come through the Barcelona academy and the fees that were involved in his move. But I think what you have to or remember in that situation is that it's still a player with a lot of variables and things that can hamper you in your development. And what you have to remember is that players develop at different rates.
Yeah.
And I think Barry might be one of those who becomes a bit of a late bloomer, just simply because of time missed through injuries. Again, we saw this, and it sounds like he's probably going to end up back at Stockport next season. That seems to be the talk at the moment. But he was flying for them, as you say. I think he scored something like 7 goals in 7 games or something like that at the start of the League Two season, and then tore his hamstring. So you can't really help situations like that. I think, like we say, development isn't linear, and that might mean that as he gets more exposure to men's football, he develops a bit more physically for men's football as well, and that means being able to play or being able to avoid certain types of injuries and things like that. So absolutely not. I wouldn't be disappointed with how the Louis Barry situation has transpired.
Yeah, the thing with Barry is because he came onto the scene so early, I think it was like 16 when people started hearing about his name. And it's almost like a Tillerman situation where you realise they've played so much, but you don't realise how young they still are. Like Barry's only, I think he's 20. He's still 20.
Yeah, he's still so young.
And because he's been in the limelight so long, people think like his career's done or something, or like he's in his mid-20s or something and it hasn't worked out. Like he's still got so much time. When I did watch Barry though, I always felt like, well, he had the technical ability and you could see and he could get past players, he had the pace. It was almost like he played small a little bit and he was kind of hoping maybe another growth spurt for men's football where he can develop more physically and use that strength that he'd have. So that was almost always my concern with Louis Barry. But the fact that he was tearing up, I think Stockport are the League Two.
Yeah.
Last season, the fact that he was tearing that up and he was showing maybe he was too good for that level is a promising sign. Yeah, that's what you want to be seeing when these guys go down. Like, just a clear like difference in level, especially at his age as well. So like Charlie said, man, I think late bloomer. Like even if it takes him till he's like 25, 26 to get to the Premier League, like, do you know what I mean? That's a successful career.
He still made it, yeah.
Yeah, just because he didn't reach the pre-prepared narratives that people had for him and how his career will go doesn't mean that it's an unsuccessful career, in my opinion.
Yeah, facts. Totally agree. And as we stated earlier, as many as the players make it as possible to a professional level, they've made it and they've become professionals. You know, football can be so ruthless at this moment in time,
Yeah,
and
and a lot of luck is
it's
needed.
not good. Of course. And Charlie, do you feel going more into the academy and the welfare side? Do you feel Villa provide an all round? How do I put this? Like an all round experience and good well being for the players within the academy, and you know those who don't make it. Do they help them to progress in? You know, either finding another club or going into another development, getting courses, etc., or going into another career?
I'm not too versed in what Villa offer in this sense, but I do think there is a bit of loyalty that comes to players who have represented the club for so long. I think next season we'll see someone like Sil Swinkles will be offered a year's contract, and that's kind of a display of loyalty based on the fact that he's just had a year out with an ACL. And those sorts of things. I think Villa, I don't know whether this is as common in other academies, but Villa definitely like to give out those 1-year contracts to almost help a player get to the stage where they're more prepared to leave Villa. I think football has become a lot more progressive in the preparative side of leaving a football club. And I think it would surprise me if Villa weren't working heavily to sort of soften the landing of being released from an academy. There's a couple of players that I followed on, or that I do follow on Instagram, and it's nice to see them come out of the Villa Academy and go on and have enjoyment from football. So there's a defender called Luke Softly who was with the under-18s last season. He's just been representing Hungerford, who were like a sizable non-league team.
Yeah.
Patrick Zito, Paula Pyer left Villa, went to Leicester, and he's been at Maidstone this season. Obviously, they had their cup run this season. He was featuring for them, and it's nice seeing those stories where it hasn't necessarily been a success at Villa, but they've still gone on to have, like I say, enjoyable, reasonable level careers.
Yeah, it is. You're right, and it's good to see those people prosper. If they don't make it, that's for sure. And I hope Villa do offer them everything they need and require. If it doesn't work out at Villa, and I'm sure they do, for the most part. So yeah, just Villa in general, Charlie. And as we close this out, how do you feel as an academy in general? And are we in a good place going forward? And
just one more question as well, bro.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, go on.
I want to know, Charlie. I want to know your opinions as well. I think it took quite a lot of people by surprise. I think there was a jovial kind of aspect around it. Some concern by other people. But what did you think of Emery having his own flesh and blood on a Premier League bench this Sunday? So I want to know your opinions on that.
I think
let's come up with this part first, and then we'll end on that as well if you want.
I think it's a bit of a joke, to be honest. I can understand it more given the context. So James Wright, who's been on the bench a couple of times this season, I understand is travelling to Hong Kong for the Hong Kong Sevens, and so he wouldn't have been free to sit on the bench. But yeah, I think it sends a pretty bad message to the academy that you can come in for 6 months, be the manager's son, and sort of undermine the academy structure that's been in place throughout these years to get a bench appearance. Granted, it is only a bench appearance in a dead rubber at the end of the season. So I think a lot of fans will view it as something that we can write off. But I think my respect has lessened for whether it's NSWE or whether it's for Monchi for sort of enabling a system to be created where the manager feels empowered to make that decision.
Yeah.
because I don't think that happens at more serious clubs. You don't see if it's Guardiola or someone like that signing his son and putting him on the bench for Man City, and I think it shows a bit of a. People have been using the word Sunday League, but I think it's a bit amateur the way it happened.
Yeah, I do hear that point of view for sure, and I do agree in this instance, especially with academy keepers who are in position. We're not short of good academy goalkeepers, and yeah, looking at it that way. I don't what level has he played to, Emery?
He's played, I want to say like 6 or 7 games for the under-21s. He played 45 minutes of the Birmingham Senior Cup final, and to the better extent has done a reasonable job. Like there's nothing sort of outstanding that has shone, bar a penalty shootout where he saved a couple of pens and was the hero. But I've not really seen anything to say this guy is going to be number 1 in 5 years' time for Villa.
Yeah.
There's not going to be clubs lining up to loan him, I don't think, unless it's Ray Union.
That might be the case.
But no, I just, like I say, I think it's the message that it sends. I've been speaking to one of the players' dads, and they're a bit miffed by it. And I think it's those sorts of things, those relationships where if you're going to take 1% or 2% away from every player's family and their relationship and what they expect to see from Villa, and you gain 1% of Lander Emery getting some experience, which is more valuable to the club, and I think it's the relationships with the players who are going to be annoyed with the decision.
No, I do hear it from that perspective for sure. Yeah, it was an interesting decision to say the least, and I totally see your point of view of the respect factor and parents of of other players within the system seeing that and thinking that's potentially a bit out of order. A comment from Michael said that happened quite a back in the day. Sir Alex did it with a Duncan Ferguson. Maybe a Steve Bruce with Alex Bruce. Was Alex Bruce to that level? I could think of Zinedine Zidane. I know his son was also a goalkeeper as well and used to get on the bench at Real Madrid. So yeah, it's not restricted to just Unai Emery, but that has happened previously. But yeah, I totally hear that point of view, especially if it doesn't seem that he's been performing to that level within the academy.
As I say, I think this might come back, and I might look an idiot in a couple of years. He might be on the bench regularly.
I hope that's the case with both of us. Yeah,
but I think, like you said, there's a number of goalies that have been part of this academy structure for years, and sort of, like I say, undermine that structure a little bit. I think for me, it left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth seeing that at the weekend.
Yeah, for sure.
Just to end on a good note, though, Charlie's kind of reminded me about the youth league in Europe. I'm kind of looking forward to that now, and seeing some of them games, and if they're televised and but seeing Villa go up against some of the best youngsters in Europe, like that's quite exciting. Actually, thinking about that, and I think a lot of the academy players might be excited about that as well.
I remember the Next Gen Cup years ago when Villa beat Chelsea, which had like Sammy Carruthers, Jack Grealish in, I think Gary Gardner as well, and that was massive at the time for youth football. That was like the Champions League of youth football at the time. So yeah, it would be good to see him in this.
I think that the format is the really exciting thing about this. So the match days mirror what the first team will be doing. So let's say hypothetically we draw Madrid away, then I think it's typically on the same day as the game.
Yeah, it's normally like 5 o'clock, isn't it?
Yeah, or like 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. And being someone that has been to everywhere across Europe this season, I'm excited by the prospect of going and potentially seeing the academy team play, whether it's at the Castilla Stadium or something like that, and seeing our academy go up against Real Madrid or whoever it is. And that's a different aspect of it. Again, is having the exposure to traveling long distances and preparing for games and things like that. It's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll close out on that. And yeah, as I said, just the position of Villa's academy now, and are we in a good place, do you feel? And just going forward, do things look bright?
I think it's a transitional phase at the moment. I think we have a bunch of players who are coming up to that decision phase of their career. I mentioned Sil Swinkles there, who's going to get a year contract because he had an ACL. You could even argue players like Timur Bunam and Rico Richards, who are of a certain age, need to start thinking about, am I going to have a professional career here at Villa, or does this need to be somewhere else? What I would say is that we do have a wealth of talent coming through. There's players throughout the academy who play beautiful football. Ben Broggio, I think, is one that I see fans take a shine into because he essentially dribbles like Grealish. And he's a Villa fan, and he talks about Villa on Twitter and stuff like that. And it's someone who's sort of already developed a bit of an affiliation with the fans. So I think fans would like to see him do well. But yeah, there's absolutely talent coming through. Cole Brannigan, who's a really sort of right place, right time winger. Strong on the ball, strong ball skills, and comes up with a lot of goals and assists. So yeah, I think it's hard to put a clear linear judgment on it, but yeah, I think as always in the academy that we're always working to produce and bring through talent, and yeah, at least I think we can expect to see some exciting stuff in the under-21s. Whether that makes its way through to the first team, you'd hope so, but as we've discussed, it might not necessarily, and there's no shame in that.
Yeah, I hear that for sure. Yeah, we're gonna end it here, guys. Thanks all for joining. This has been a great show, man, and getting your thoughts, Charlie. We appreciate it. And this won't be the last time. Hopefully, we'd love to have you on again if you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Happy to come on for sure.
Charlie, just last point. Where can people go and follow your content? If you want to just remind people where they can go and see what you're posting.
The main place will be Twitter at Academy AVFC. I've also got an Instagram page that I update some of the time, which is the same handle, Academy AVFC. But yeah, Twitter will be the main one. That's where I post all of the stuff. That's where I post clips. The Hong Kong Soccer Sevens will be streamed this weekend. That's live on Facebook and YouTube. I think the Villa games are early morning, so we're playing our group stage games on Saturday, 8:10, 9:15, and 11:15. So that's a good opportunity for anyone who's looking to see some of these players take to the stage.
Yeah, I think I want to watch it. Yeah.
I'll be kicking into that for sure.
Because we've got heritage in that tournament. We've got a lot of it goes back like a while, yeah, man. So I'll be locked into that.
A few times. Yeah, guys. For Charlie's handle as well, it's in the title, so his X handle or Twitter.
You know what to do, man. If you're not following, go follow. And
I think the majority who watch this definitely are following you because, as we say, you are the source for the Villa Academy on Twitter, for sure. Bro, yeah, thanks for joining. Charlie, as I said, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on. Again, guys, if you could subscribe if you're new around here and drop any comments you have regarding the stream and what we've discussed as well. We're always responding and we appreciate your support and hope you're continuing to enjoy our content. As always, we leave it here, up the Villa, and thanks for joining.